Hey everyone, George here with Wine Industry Network. Welcome to another episode of the Win Insider Series. And for those of you that haven't seen any of these, it's just a chance for us to get to know different people in our industry who play different roles and get the chance to learn a little bit about them on a professional level, but ideally get to learn a little bit more about them on a personal level. And today we're super excited. We got Karissa Kruse, who I've known for a long time. Karissa is the CEO and president of the Sonoma County Winegrowers. And she's also the executive director for the Sonoma County Grape Growers Foundation, which is the charitable component for the wine growers. And Chris, thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to catch up with you.
I know, it's so cool. You know, it's funny. I was thinking about, I was getting ready for putting just being prepared for our conversation today and thinking about how long we've known each other. So we got to meet when I was still thinking about doing Wine Industry Network, and I was, getting in front of the North Bay Angels and trying to raise money, and you were part of the North Bay Angels and giving me some advice. And I remember you telling me and it was a tough time. It was like 2008 or so. Nobody really had any money. Yeah. But I remember you telling me you know what? If you don't really need any money, don't take any money. Just figure it out.
Yourself. Yeah.
You'll be happier.
And you're happy.
It worked out. It was pretty good advice.
No, I was thinking about that too. In prep for today, I was like, gosh, we got to know each other before I had this role with Sonoma County Winegrowers and the association. And I loved it. So it was just it's been so much fun to see what you've done with Wine Industry Network. And now I'm being interviewed by you. that's cool. So, literally.
Well, it's funny because I've been on, you've got your radio show, or I don't know if it's the same show or it's changed, but I've been on at least 3 or 4 times with you. So I was thinking about that as well. It's like a chance to kind of reverse the rules a little bit. And,
tables are turned.
Yeah, I like this. I like interviewing people, right? So even when I interview people that I know like you, it's it's always a chance to get to know a little bit more about them, learn or that you knew. So why don't we do this? Let's just start with talking about the wine growers and your role there for people that don't know.
Yeah, sure. So Sonoma County Winegrowers is essentially the trade association representing the 1,800 grape growers in Sonoma County. Our mission is pretty simple. We are all about promoting the wine region, sort of recognizing that if people are invested in brand Sonoma County and want to support brand Sonoma County and a bottle of wine, then that literally helps our grape growers have a market for their grapes. So we do a lot in terms of marketing and hospitality and sort of going out on the road to talk about Sonoma County and our farming and our wineries. And then the other piece of it is really helping, to the extent we can, really preserve agriculture here in Sonoma County and beyond Sonoma County. So really thinking about what does it take to be a farmer these days? How do you navigate agriculture? What's new? What's legacy? And recognizing that's a pretty complicated business with multi-generational families. So much we want to preserve about our local farming community. So all the things I do sort of ladder up into those 2 main things.
Well, one of the things that I just love about you, and right from the get-go, is how bold you are when you set goals, right? So it's just mind-boggling, right? So I want to say it was maybe around 2013 or thereabouts. You just taken over in your role. Yeah. I think you were in charge of all the marketing for the association. That was your first role, and then you took over the role of the executive director. I think at the time was what it was called. And so your first goal is you're going to be the first wine growing region that's 100% sustainable, right? So, and just for me, I remember thinking okay, that's when you start to get extremes, okay, everybody's going to get in. That's our goal. And I remember that, okay, that's pretty bold. And then the next year you come back and you kind of okay, next, because every year you have your dollars and cents, right? And that's where you kind of get up there and announce your goals. The next goal is you're going to talk about a business plan, right? So I'm thinking business plan. She's got a 5-year plan. She's got a 10-year plan. Now you've got a 100-year business plan. And I was like, what? What is going on here, right? But really when I thought about it, it was great, right? Because it was a headline grabber by people. So people are going to pay attention to what you're doing and the work that you're doing. So I love that. And the other thing I really loved about it was at the end of the day, when you're talking about agriculture and farming, it's not, you can't just be talking about the next 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years. You really need to think like that. So, but what inspired you to come up with I'm going to do a 100-year business plan?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I just, spending time out with our farmers out in their vineyards on their ATVs, zipping around at Mach speed through a property, or sitting, literally on the back of a truck, or there's always this story that comes out, and it's just honoring, we have 95% of our vineyards in Sonoma County are family owned. So like it's honoring sort of this legacy that they feel like they're the caretakers of, whether that's the ranch, literally the soil, the employees. And then they talk about it often in like, and I really hope my kids get into this business. And I really see this vision of my grandkids someday being on this property. And you start to do the math, we're like, okay, like grandparent to grandkid, that's 100 years in time span. And if we're not thinking, I mean, our farmers were thinking that way without articulating it. So I think I added a framework to what is the natural sort of inclination for our ag families to be thinking about their investments, their legacy, their land. And so 100 years makes a lot of sense in that way. Like, I hear, the farmers talk, especially when they're planting, you're absolutely right. Like a 3 to 5 year business plan, like that goes out the wind. I mean, if they're planting a vineyard, that's a 30-year investment, maybe a 50-year investment. And so, in some cases, they're making those decisions and their kids or grandkids are going to be essentially living with those decisions. And so it seemed really important to really honor. I mean, we had our first vineyards here planted, I think, back in like 1812 out on the coast. So we really were kind of in our, second century of grape growing here. So how did we get here? So it's kind of this acknowledgement of like, we had these families, we had, support, we had, government supporting us, legislation, marketing, partners, supply chain, all of this built up around the industry over the last 200 years. So what do we need of that to continue? What do we need to grow? What do we need less of to sort of be successful? And so it was really just kind of a blueprint. We brush it off about every 3 to 5 years and kind of write those 3 to 5 year more actionable goals against the long term. But it gave us a roadmap. And I think, in any business, you want that compass to really say, are we staying true to sort of the path we're supposed to be on?
So one of the other things I was thinking about when I was working on, getting prepared was, the growers in general, farmers in general tend to be, very, conservative and thoughtful about the decisions that they make, right? Because to your point, you put in a varietal that you think is going to be great and it's not, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, now what do I do?
What do I do? Yeah.
So they tend to, like I said, be a little bit, conservative in their thoughts. And when you start presenting ideas like we're going to be 100% sustainable, we're going to create a 100-year business plan, what kind of reaction do you get? Because it's kind of like a boys club, right? I mean, it is, it's changing. It's changing, but it's a boys club, and you kind of break the mold. So how do those conversations go?
The sustainability commitment was a little frightening for me. I'll be honest. I like to say it was probably one of the scariest days in my career when I kind of stood up at that dollars and cents meeting and say, and I had to make sure I was like, I'm representing the vote of the board of directors. So this was approved. This wasn't me out on a whim, but had been a thoughtful conversation and months of thoughtful conversation. But yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking, but I think also, literally when the board decided and the hiring committee decided to promote me out of that marketing director role, I think they were ready and maybe acknowledging that I would bring some outside thinking into what's been, decades of sort of continuity in the region. And we're looking for that. And I think as long as I honored who they are and their values and the things we were committing to were really connected to those values. So like absolutely sustainability is at the core of the DNA. And when I was talking to the board members back in 2013, it was like, well, we're already doing this and we're already committed to multi-generational farming. So of course we want healthier soils. Of course we want to conserve water. Of course we want to be a lighter carbon footprint. Like those were just like, absolutely. So again, let's put a framework of a sustainability assessment and an audit and improvement around these things that were really value driven for them already. So I think staying in that place, that comfort zone of being connected to their values, but then looking for ways to really elevate the conversation about those values and that commitment was where sort of that sweet spot was. So, and then once we came out and said we wanted to be the most sustainable wine growing region in the world, it was like, oh, you want to write a 100-year business plan? Sure, sounds good. Like, let's do that too, So you start to build some credibility, I guess, after, and also you have to deliver. I mean, I think that's always been really important. If we had, if the growers and our board had made that goal of sustainability and then walked away from it because it was hard or it took a lot of conversations and it took a lot of investment and it took work, frankly.
Yeah.
Then maybe we wouldn't have that credibility, but because they committed, because they felt like it resonated, it was them and represented who they were and are, is something they really owned. So maybe I waved the flag for the first year or so on it, but then they really, took it on, and now they're so proud that this badge of being the most sustainable wine growing region is them. And it's Sonoma County. It's their families and their ranches.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I am a fan of just being bold, right? And making like,
Yeah.
this is what we're
Yes,
going to
you
do.
are.
And it might seem hard, but we're going to do it. And we don't know
Yeah.
exactly how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. And that's how great things happen, right? So one thing I wanted to add, you mentioned earlier about how many family-owned farms we have, and some of the multi-generational grape growing families that we have, but we have other folks that are newer to the grower community. Are your conversations much different with those folks versus one of your other members that are, because everybody's a member. Like if you're in Sonoma
Yeah.
County, you're part of the wine growers. How different are the conversations between somebody who's like a 3, 4, 5 generations in versus somebody who made a lot of money in tech and wants to go out there and farm some grapes?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the goals are pretty similar. We want a great high quality crop. We want to have good partners. We want healthy soils. I mean, all of those things that are kind of about sort of the aspects or best practices. I think where you enter though matters in terms of, it's where you start. So I think when I actually say this all the time. I'm like, Sonoma County is so blessed because we have all this multi-generational knowledge, but then we also have this very entrepreneurial spirit where you can come in and be a new winemaker and be scrappy, or be a grower and come in and want to learn. And so I think in that sense, it starts a little different. And with the newer growers, or maybe someone that came in and bought a ranch or wants to plant a vineyard, I really like partnering them with one of those family farmers or with one of our vineyard management companies. And I even say multiple, like go learn from those folks. Like don't make the same mistakes. Like all the mistakes that have been made in grape growing have been made probably multiple times around the county. Yeah. So go sit down with the Duff Bevel, go meet with a Kevin Barr or Tyler Click from Redwood Empire Vineyard Management, or the Duttons or the Sanchettis or St. Giacomo's, or like go meet with them, because our farmers are so collaborative and willing to share, especially the mistakes they've made. You're probably even, they're sometimes too humble to share the success, but certainly they talk about the mistakes. And like, it's great to get that learning. So my advice always, and where I think the different conversation is to really partner and say, spend some time, like pause on the decision-making for just a little bit, get out in the community, meet some of your neighbors. Like your neighbors are gonna have the best information about what's going on in that region, what plants well, what rootstock you should use, and then move forward. So I think that's where it's a little different. So I think and we talk a lot more about succession planning with those family farmers. Not that I would say the newbies don't want to focus on that too, because sometimes this is their legacy part of their career is, coming here and putting down roots. But I do think the multi-generational family farmers are thinking about it probably as one of their first filters always in their decision making.
Well, I think it's funny too. Like, I mean, we always talk about our industry in general being an all ships rise with the tide type of a situation. And I think on the grower side, I think that's probably the best example of it. And I think you just pointed that out in a really good way. It's that they're not really, we're all in it together, right? So it's like helping your neighbor be a better farmer or avoid some of the mistakes that you may have made, or maybe your father made or your grandfather made. Yes. There's no trade secrets. Like they're just all about like, hey, what's good for you is good for me. It's good for us. Yeah. Let's help each other out.
And George, I think grape growers and / Sonoma County are a little unique. I had my previous career opportunity to work with other other ag, and not anything against other ag, but I think maybe literally because their ranches are more further apart, they're not neighbors necessarily in all the cases, or the ranches are bigger and more spread out. But Sonoma County grape growers are incredibly, like they are the cream of the crop when it comes to collaboration. Like I haven't really seen anything like it. I've gone back to my friends back in the dairy industry, my old CEO that I work for, and he's like, what they're doing there? He's like, I haven't seen that. Like it's kind of, I always say the farmers are the secret sauce of our region. Like that ability to say, like, we aren't competing. And I want, if I'm found a way to use less water, then it helps everyone in the community. If you also use less water, it helps everyone if we're not spreading pests around. So let's share that. I mean, or what does it cost, or what's the benefit of an electric vehicle or charging stations? Like if they can help their neighbors save that dollar or invest wisely, like they want to do that. And it's pretty special.
It is special. It's just like, it feels like a disconnect from how the world has evolved, sadly.
I love it. I know.
And very much a
Right?
throwback to how things were, and we kind of wish they were like that across the board. So it's refreshing.
Yeah.
So it's not. So I'm trying to go in like some sort of a sequence here, and some of the things that you've done and announced. But so it's not. So up until then, things are rolling along, and then we have some things not so great. So a first round of fires that came
Yeah.
through, and I remember you doing some presentations that talked about and highlighted how these vineyards became like a fire block and maybe
Yeah.
saved, I don't even know how many homes, but
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that, because I remember that it was kind of a very emotional time, and I just remember being like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, and it was learning. I mean, I think for all of us, right? I mean, I think the community doesn't know till unfortunately right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, back in 17, when we experienced the first wildfires, I was just getting incredible photos in from some of the growers that were like, oh my gosh, the fire was coming down the hill and then it hit our vineyard and it just stopped after like the first two vine rows. Like it just, if it doesn't have the fuel, and if you think about vineyards being this living thing literally year round, and maintained, and I want to say, it's taken care of. So the pictures were just like incredible to
Yeah.
see. So I think that became a really important part of the conversation. And even, I mean, still to this day, we work a lot with Cal Fire. We've done like, wildfire safety training, and that piece that the vineyards play such an important role, and pastures. Actually, frankly, all ag plays a really important role, not just vineyards, because the same pictures would be if it was going through sort of a big ranch, and that, the pasture that was maintained, the cows were out there, sheep were out there, it stopped the fires because there wasn't that fuel. So I think, working lands really, as we kind of term them, are really important in communities around California. And, something I appreciate even more now than I thought I ever would.
No, I think it was a really great way to illustrate that it's important to save these farmland.
Yes.
And thank God that we had these natural fire breaks that were created from these vineyards, and it saved people, it helped people, and it was just,
Cool.
those pictures were just amazing.
I
So
know.
so then I'm going to fast forward to just kind of staying the course here with some of the other things that you've been involved in, which I think are great. When the pandemic hit, and the vaccines first came out, you played a really important role of making sure that our farm workers had priority and could get those vaccines when you couldn't get them. Like, it's harder, you think back to those days, it was so
I
crazy.
know.
And not to say everybody was, pro-vaccine or not, but
It doesn't matter.
it was
Yeah.
important. And you helped make sure that our farm workers were at the front of the line.
Yeah. I was actually sharing the other day. I think I ended up technically being accountable for about 6,000 vaccination appointments in those first few months, which was just crazy. I mean, it's all I did literally for probably 3 months. It was so important. And this was such a great example, I think, of just like, if you can find, like, collaborations are so important. Partnerships are so important. They're literally the foundation, I think, of almost everything we do at Sonoma County Winegrowers. And it was really true. And you think, well, who's going to be your partner? You're like, okay, marketing partners, Food and Wine Magazine, sure, like that's a check mark. Absolutely, they should be partners.
Right.
But thinking about like our community health organizations, I mean, that was just, I feel like just a shining moment for like everyone in Sonoma County working together. So we were able to, and with Sonoma County Vintners, with Sonoma County Farm Bureau, so kind of holistically looking at what would be considered, essential workforce.
Yeah.
Able to bridge. So those partnerships, I remember we had weekly, it was every Friday morning, we had a standing call with all the community health centers. And it was like, okay, what's the next week look like? How many appointments, where? And what was tricky is that the community health centers were getting vaccinations, but they could only, based on their charters, give them to people that were in their zip codes. Like everything was being navigated by zip codes.
Right.
So I was collecting all this data. I mean, my spreadsheet was just insanity and color coding, and like no one else would ever understand it except like my mind in those moments. I don't even think I could probably reread it today and understand what I was thinking then. But, we were like capturing people like, oh, they're up in Cloverdale. No, they're in Geyserville. Oh, they're out in Guerneville. No, they're in Sebastopol. They're in Santa Rosa. And really working through then matching and I remember I personally sent every email because we would send out these links and they might have 100 appointments on a link. And I had to be like, you get 5, don't book 10, don't book 7, book 5. And if you're not going to book 5, you're going to book 4, let me know, because I'm going to give that extra slot to someone else. And so there was so much trust that I think the community really came together and just delivered on like, hey, we really are working together to do this. So it was probably one of the most meaningful things I've ever worked on. And in such a crazy time, right? I mean, we're all just like, what is going on in the world?
Yeah.
So, but it felt like, doing something, a little something good felt great.
Well, I'm sure it was a very welcome distraction, right? Because we needed something to keep our minds moving.
Yes.
But I think about the
Yes.
people that you were helping, it's like left to their own devices. If you and some of the people you work with weren't out there and working on behalf of our farm workers, like they would be last in line.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
thought that was one of the things among others that I just was like incredibly impressed by, and people don't really notice. Like it's not something
Yeah.
that it's not going to be part of your marketing plan,
Right.
or help sell another bottle of wine or get an extra, couple $100 per ton for the grapes. But it was a really important thing, and so I just thought that was fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah. No, I'm really proud of that effort.
So then, okay, so I'm going to stay with pandemic time.
Okay.
So while you're
Awesome.
doing that, or after you're doing that, then you decide you're going to launch the U.S. wine industry's first innovation accelerator, right? Which I
Oh
think
yeah.
you announced like online, and
No.
what would you call it? Was like kind of like a chance for people to pitch
Yeah.
new ideas and new technology, kind of Shark Tank style. So,
Yeah.
like, how did that idea come about?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Midwest, right? My grandparents had farms in Iowa and Nebraska. So I got to spend summers out on the Nebraska farm, and I was realizing and seeing that just it felt like to me that whenever I read headlines or do research, like, and I call it big ag, but like corn, soybeans, even dairies to some extent, they were getting the partnerships, they were getting the innovation, they were getting like to try the new technology, the new tractors. And I was like, well, and you have a kind of a reality check, even though we live in this world in Sonoma County, Northern California, where wine and wine grapes are like such a driver of agriculture. But in the world, wine grapes, even specialty crops in general, are a very small percentage of total ag. So for a lot of organizations, it's tricky if it's worth their investment to really look at what happens in vineyards. And so the idea was just like, could we throw, open, like do an invite, like, hey, if you have something interesting, like come talk to us about it. Because, you don't know where to go necessarily. And it's like, you were back in the startup phase when we first met. It's like, as a startup business, like, God, if you had an invite where you could meet some farmers that might be able to be proof of concept, that would be incredible. And so it's funny, like that particular project never really like caught legs. I would say it's one of those things, and I think probably the timing and everything, but it was a foundation, like the thought of it became part of our Farm of the Future effort, which is now a big part of what we're doing. So it's kind of like this inkling. I don't want to say it was like a failure because it just never really caught on. We never got the momentum with it. But now, a different version of it is like thriving. So I think you just got to keep trying things and seeing what works.
Well, I think that's like the entrepreneurial part of you, which makes you different than other people who are in similar roles, that you're willing to try different things.
Yeah.
And as any entrepreneur, like I'll certainly admit this, like almost everything I come up with doesn't work exactly the way I hope it was, but it
Yes.
often turns into something else, right? And I think that's the key.
Yeah.
I have these little things around my office, and they all sort of say the same thing in different ways, which is like, don't give up,
Yeah.
right? So there's no failure unless you don't fail unless you quit and things of that nature. And I think that's a kind of a good example of exactly how that's how
Yeah.
those sort of things happen.
George, I was gonna say, I joke that like, and my board sort of groans now, but like I say, we'll pilot anything and everything. And if it doesn't work, well, we learned. If it works, great, let's scale it, right? So it's like piloting something gives you a mental like relief to be able to say, like, well, let's try something. Like we're just piloting it. We're not like going all in, we're gonna try it, and sort of gives you permission to fail or succeed or change it or pivot or whatever it is. So I totally agree. I think you have to.
No, that's just a good message. I don't care what kind of business you're in. It's like, or just life in general. Like, just be okay with like things not working out the way you thought.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. In fact, there's a million examples of things that you think was a really bad thing that turned out to be a really good thing. And that just comes with experience. Well, I'm going to talk about something that definitely grabbed the gear and which I love was the launch of Leadership Academy.
Yeah.
So for people that don't know anything about that, because I love this, I think this is another one of those things that I could see like makes you smile. Talk about the Leadership Academy for someone who doesn't know anything about it, because it's awesome.
Yeah, so as you mentioned at the beginning, the other role we kind of have is working with our foundation. So our foundation's mission, literally super simple, support our vineyard employees and their families. That's it. Like, so sadly, we've done that through sort of the vaccination process. We've had to do it through wildfire support and resources. But I'm so proud of, I mean, about back in, and I say this, it might be a little bit of a long-winded answer to get to how important the program is, but
That's okay.
back in when we relaunched the foundation, we didn't have, I mean, frankly, we didn't have a budget, right? So what do you do when you don't have money? We kind of joke, we're like, well, the one thing we could do is give someone an award. We can honor them, recognize them. That's pretty inexpensive to do. It makes people feel really good. So back in 2018, we started our Vineyard Employee Recognition Program. And literally, we just asked farmers every month, different category, nominate one of their employees that, you know, is excelling in that. So we did, I want to say, like hard skills, like the actual farming, gritty skills, like pruning and safety. And then we also did, okay, like communication and collaboration and taking initiative and leadership. Like, so, you know, really honoring the workforce in sort of, you know, their farming skills and also some of those softer skills that really take, you know, management and being a crew leader. And so it was so incredibly successful. I mean, the employees were just so excited. We took a professional photo of them. They got a $500 gift card. We've recognized them on social media. We've put ads in our local paper. And then at the end of the year, we would do our employee recognition, like celebration lunch. And literally the whole deal was they invited their families. Yeah. So their families could see them come up on stage, be honored, get their plaque. Congressman Thompson would come, and then we would name the employee of the year, and that employee of the year would get like $1,000. And now kind of the Press Democrat and others follow along with our employee of the year. And so like the first year it was kind of quiet. So the second year employee recognition, second year we hired a mariachi band. That helped a lot. So that's now foundational to every one of our events with our foundation. But we just realized it was so great. I mean, you know, these men and women that work in our vineyards, I mean, maybe this is the first time their family has seen that what they do matters. It matters to the community, it matters to agriculture, it matters to their employer. It was so special. And so we sort of said, well, how do we elevate that even more? Like, and now that we started to have a relationship with just, you know, so many of our employees around the county that work for all the different ranches and wineries and growers. And so, you know, I've been fortunate, and I'll be honest, it's great when there's a program out there and you can literally just repurpose it for your sort of market. So I was part of Leadership Santa Rosa, a program done through the Metro Chamber here in Santa Rosa, Sonoma County. And I just loved it because it was about networking with other people in the community. It was about really understanding the resources of Sonoma County and also learning leadership skills. And we said, what if we were to do that kind of leadership academy? We called it an academy for our vineyard employees. And so we met with some of the growers and said, what would you want your employees to learn? And they're like, well, you don't have to teach them, you know, farming. They don't need to learn pruning. Like, we'll handle that. Like, but yeah, teach them how to do better communication, conflict resolution, financial literacy, about their healthcare resources in the community, about where they can go for help, like just like education. They maybe have never potentially been on a college campus, take them to Sonoma State and showcase to them, help them figure out that there's financial aid available for their kids if they want to go to college or scholarships. And so we kind of packaged up it's 6 months, 8 sessions, and we really are mindful of making sure it doesn't disrupt, you know, harvest or some of the key time periods in agriculture here. But the whole deal is if there's been an employee that's been recognized as an employee of the month, they can then be nominated for our Leadership Academy. And so we have about 20 members, the Leadership Academy. We wrapped up year 3 this past summer, and it's just awesome. It's a half-day session. We get community leaders from around the county come in that are subject matter experts and sort of own the day with us. And they network. I mean, they're all on WhatsApp now, texting each other. And I think it's created this, like, you know, you see the network amongst the family farmers, right? Like I see it all the time, like all the West County farmers, Russian River farmers, they kind of know each other. If a tractor breaks, they're calling each other if they need help. But we wanted to create a similar network among the workforce. So it doesn't have to be an owner that has that relationship to if they need help or have an idea, I want to brainstorm, or, you know, I'm seeing something out there, I don't know what to do. And so we've seen this like unintended, but even probably more beneficial outcome, which has just been the relationship building amongst the workforce, amongst all these different, you know, organizations. And so, yeah, we're gearing up for year 4. We just got a grant from CDFA, California Department of Food and Agriculture. And we're actually going to do, I think, expand Leadership Academy, and we're looking at doing sort of Leadership Academy 2.0. So if you graduated out, you can come back in and you're like the next level of, education. And once you graduate, you become a mentor for the next class. So that was part of kind of creating an alumni network. And we do ongoing, not as often, but like more quarterly education for the alumni network.
Well, I remember
the
first year, and we had the lunch, you had the luncheon, and I remember some of the folks, bringing their families and taking pictures with their kids and everything. And
yeah,
just the biggest smiles, especially with the kids, it's just like you could see you could feel their pride, which I just thought was like, that was so cool.
Yeah.
Now, was this the same group that you just took to Washington, D.C.?
Yeah.
Talk about that, because I thought that
gosh.
was incredibly cool too. Like most of them probably have never been to Washington, D.C., right?
None of them.
Or on a plane. Some of them are not even on a plane, right?
Yeah, some of them are not on a plane. Yeah. So it's funny what you were mentioning. We actually put them, I should have mentioned, we put them through a formal graduation in front of their families and employers, a big day. And yeah, some of them have never walked across the stage. We don't make them wear the gown, but we get them the, graduation caps, and they throw them up in the air. And it's so awesome. And American Ag actually, for their graduation, historically has given them $1,000 gift cards sort of to honor the fact that they graduated from this program. So many benefits. But yeah, a couple of years ago, we've been really so blessed. We have a really nice partnership with Alaska Airlines, and obviously they have their local regional hub here, and we've just gotten to know their team. And they asked, so like, how do we do more in the community to support agriculture? And you think about Alaska Airlines, and you're like, well, you could write a check, but organizations, are looking to say, here's what we do. How do we merge what we do in a meaningful way with what you do? Yeah, we could give money, but we'd rather really create experiences or provide opportunities. And so it's like, okay, well, you can fly people places, and it's expensive to fly people places. And so we kind of just threw out, we're like, at this time we graduated class 1 and 2. So we had like 35 graduates over the 2 years. And we were like, well, what if you flew all of our Leadership Academy members to Washington, D.C.? And they were like, well, what does that look like? I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, can we figure it out? And they're like, how many people? I'm like, well, we probably need about 35 tickets. So like, okay, like how many days and what? And we just started talking about it, and they came back and they're like, yeah, we're in, we'll just do it. And so we flew out of San Francisco into Reagan. We had a big event to surprise the Leadership Academy. Congressman Thompson came and said, I want you all to come Washington, D.C., come meet with me in my office, come tour the Capitol, let's have dinner, let's host a Congressional Wine Caucus. And literally Alaska Airlines came with one of those big, actually I'm going to just
go get it.
This is the original, but it's here. So they show up. I can't even honestly see if I scoot back here in my camera. I'm blurring out. Anyway, you get the idea. But it's this amazing airline boarding pass. And it was like, you're invited to Washington, D.C., and we're going to pay for it. And it was like, we literally had to kind of keep repeating the message. Like I had to come up, and we do everything in Leadership Academy translated. So Spanish and English. And I'm like, is it not translating? Like, am I not translating? Like, you're going to DC. And it was just like, what? Like, and so bar none, the coolest thing we've ever done. I mean, Leadership Academy was cool, but this was now like the capstone of the Leadership Academy. And like you said, like none of them have been to DC. Some of them had never been on a plane. Just this literally a trip of a lifetime. I mean, and I love Congressman Thompson. He stood up at one point and said, like you are literally at the epicenter of the free world right here in Washington, D.C. And I still get chills. And it's like, they're there going, I matter. I'm part of this conversation. I'm important to Sonoma County. I'm important to agriculture. And, we hosted a Congressional Wine Caucus. Speaker Emerita Pelosi shows up. It's like a rock star had walked in, because I think, if you think about one of the most recognizable people on the news, it's, Speaker Emerita Pelosi. And she was so gracious taking pictures. We sent all of their wine. So if they grew grapes for the wine, we sent it in advance to every single venue that we were going to have wine at for the reception, for dinners. And they would just run. I remember they would run up and be like, Nancy, I grew these grapes and this wine, you've got to try it. Or Mike, Congressman Thompson, I grew these grapes, and like just the pride. And so, so Alaska signed up. We came back this last year. So just back in June, we took the 3rd Leadership Academy class with us. They provided all the tickets again, and they have said, I've got them on video. So it's always good to record, right? Record everything. I got them on video saying like, we're in, like, we want to keep building this program with you. So I think just I look forward to seeing, where we even go from there, because DC is so awesome. So what's next,
Yeah, yeah. DC is so crazy for, I mean, anybody to go there, but let alone, some of the folks that are part of your
Yeah.
program. But I was at the event, you invited me to come to the event with the Alaska Airlines when the executives were here in town, and you had a few of the folks from the Leadership Academy speak, and they were proud. You were smiling, like you had the biggest smile on your face. The Alaska Airlines people were super happy. It was like a big love fest. It was just the coolest thing, and yeah, that's really impressive.
I know. Do you know what's so funny is that, I feel like every year Alaska Airlines like ups the game. And so this year they actually had someone, they toured you can only have 4 at a time, but 4 Leadership Academy members. They put them in like, bright yellow vests, and they took them out on the tarmac, took them into the plane, into the cockpit, videotaped them, everything. And so that moment where that reception you're at, one of the employees had been in the cockpit, and he like in front of the CEO of Alaska Airlines was like, held up the picture, was like, hey, and thanks for letting me fly the plane. And I just remember the CEO was like, what? And he's like looking at the photo. And I was like, gosh, how much confidence that this, one of our employees has now that they didn't have a year ago, to literally present in front of the board and leadership of Alaska Airlines, talk about their story, be able to make a joke and be playful with it. Like, I was beaming. I mean, that's hard to do. Public speaking is not easy. So to do that, have it be personal in front of that kind of audience was so awesome.
Well, I loved it. I just think it's so nice when you can do good things, nice things, as part of, your bigger mission. So that was really cool for me to be able to see a little bit of that. And I look forward to seeing how that continues to evolve, because I'm sure if you haven't already, you're going to be getting into the second generation. Oh, my dad was in the first class, and that is my younger brother or my oldest son or my oldest daughter. And so that's going to happen, which is.
Yeah. And we learned, Georgia, for the first 2 Leadership Academy, 50% of the employees that went through the Leadership Academy got promotions within the first year after. And like a third, even, everyone took on new responsibilities, was better at communicating, had more confidence. Like that was sort of like the platform, but literally 50% got promoted. Like it literally, we're talking about workforce development. You're like, well, that check mark, that's a win. So
that's fantastic. All right. So not like you don't already have enough things to do, but you also have a radio show, right? So you have your radio show, and that's evolving. At first you were every other week with Steve Jackson when he had his show. And then it's morphed into you brought on Virginia Boone, who's a well-known journalist in our industry, and you do a radio show with her, and you launched The Good Stuff, which is like tell the audience a little bit about your work with Virginia and The Good Stuff, because I think this is another really cool thing.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, it stemmed out of, I did a TEDx talk a couple of years ago, and I titled it Drink the Good Stuff. And it was a little bit of my personal journey / work journey, frankly, from sustainability going through the wildfires. And it sort of honored that a couple of days before the wildfires, Steve, who's now my husband, we were newly dating, brought over this like killer bottle of wine. And it was a Tuesday night, and I was like, we're saving it. He's like, no, I just finished harvest. Who cares? I was like, pull the cork, let's just drink it. And I was like, and we did, and it was awesome. And I mean, we like took pictures, we saved the cork. We were early stages, so everything was super romantic, right? And then fast forward 5-6 days later, my house was gone, my entire wine collection was gone, the bottle was gone, the cork was gone. But like, thank God the experience wasn't gone. Like I was holding on for dear life to that experience, and it really, frankly, changed my whole mindset of just. I used to be the person, if I bought a new sweater, I would save it for the perfect occasion, or bought something. Now it's like rip the tag and wear it, because what the heck? What if, we're blessed with having today, right? So that notion of like drink the good stuff kind of evolved into The Good Stuff right around the time it just felt like really kind of coming out of COVID and just trying to find our sea legs again, and sort of how do you have conversations in the community? How do you have conversations with consumers? What's the narrative? And we're like, we need more just good storytelling. We want a chance to talk about the family stories here, the legacy, the chefs, the employees, just anything that's like the good news. Like we need more good news in our life. And, Virginia and I have been having a growing sort of friendship and partnership for a number of years, really coming out of the 17 fires. We're both like, what do we do to help our community? And so I just went to her. I'm like, do you want to write for us? Like, because the thing I know that matters is consistent content. You know this. You have to deliver this, right? You do it every day. And we were not great at. I'll just sort of take one for the team on this. In our small organization, staff changes, things happen. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, we were so good at social media and so good at writing things for like a month, and then we got busy or we traveled, and then we came back 3 months later, and then we lost our momentum. And so I really wanted someone that like loved writing, was a natural storyteller, loved our community, loved Sonoma County, and wanted to tell those stories. So we just asked her, like, would you write a weekly column for us? And she was like, yeah, I'd love to. I go, I'm literally free reign. Like, we'll throw topics your way if you want to brainstorm, but literally every week I get a good stuff email in my inbox, probably Monday night, Tuesday morning. I look at it, I'm like, cool, that looks great, like good to go. And then we publish it on Wednesday. And so that was the foundation. And then when we had the chance to sort of evolve the radio show into a weekly show, co-host it where we had more time. So we kind of went from a kind of a quick format to literally like an hour-long radio show podcast, something we could record and share on podcasts. We decided to call it The Good Stuff. And I was like, well, Virginie needs to be my natural host. She might not answer my calls anymore right away, because I think I call her up, she's like, yes. And then, like a week later, she's like, what I agree to? And I'm like, don't worry about it. We'll be good. Let's meet for a glass of wine and I'll fill you in. But she's so awesome. And she's so warm. And she has such a rich knowledge of just Sonoma County and our growers and our wineries. And like, so her ability on air, and her, I mean, just to extract and ask meaningful questions and have fun. Like, so again, it's another just way for us to sort of control, to some degree, having great output out that really tells the story of Sonoma County.
Well, I think that's what I like the most about it. It's not so much when she tells, because she covers a little bit of everything. It's like the history of Sonoma County. So you could be reading about Luther Burbank or, a multi-generational grape growing family. But I sometimes, I love the fact that she's not tied down to having to like include one of your growers in every story. It's like, it's not always about this. Like, I'm just like reading about Sonoma County, which I think is very cool. And I imagine having a journalist on the radio show helps, right? Because she's inquisitive, naturally inquisitive.
So awesome.
Do you like doing the show?
Oh, I love it. Because you always learn. It's probably what you're doing. Like, you always learn something. There's like this little nugget. Like, I'll be like, I've known Brett Munsell for 10 years, but I've never heard that story. Or I didn't know, we just did a show with Glenn Proctor. He was chair of my board, but we sat down with him and his wife, and I'm like, I had no idea that's how you and Lori met. Or I had no idea that, Proctor, which isn't an Italian name, but the roots are so deep rooted in, Italian and from Luca and the transition. So for me, it's so fun. Just because you get to, and we get the format finally to literally sit down and like this, have a really meaningful, robust conversation with someone. It's not, you're in for 10 minutes, a flash conversation, it's chaos around you. And you're like, okay, did you say your talking points? It's literally like, relax, pull up a seat, tell us who you are, welcome to the show. And so I think that's been really fun. And like I said, I love working with Virginie. I can't just say enough good stuff about she's just a great human being and like wonderful storyteller, whether it's on air or in writing. And I think we're incredibly lucky that we have, a gem like her in Sonoma County and wanting to work and showcase and tell all of our stories. So
yeah, no, it's great. And, unfortunately, it's, they're farther and fewer between to have, journalists that are a big part of our industry and support us, because it's tough to sustain yourself these days as just a journalist. Well, I think you do a great job. I love your radio show because it is exactly like that. The conversation just feels very organic. It's not, you're not just trying to hit all these key talking points, and you really feel like you got to know somebody a little bit better after listening, which that's refreshing for me. All right, now I'm going to see, and this is what I was telling you when we started this conversation. It's like, usually I go, okay, you have a few things we talk about, then you kind of run out of things, but there's no running out of things with you. So I'm going to try to not keep you too much longer, but now I want to talk a bit about, because next thing you know, I don't know if it's like you tell me or I get something from you, we're doing something with the San Francisco Giants. Okay. And then all of a sudden, now it's not just San Francisco Giants. Now you got something with the Houston Rockets. And so talk a little bit about like because I'm always curious, like, what inspired this? How did this all come about And he goes, it's different. Nobody's doing this. Like, how did you get there?
Yeah. How did we get there? That's a great question. I think you mentioned earlier like the entrepreneurial spirit. So I think like you, right, you're always just kind of aware, like things are like things stay in your head for a while, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, that idea connects. That's interesting. So I think that's what happens a lot with us in the organization or me. But the Giants thing was so fun. I mean, I can't say enough about just partnerships, relationships, like maintaining those even when there's no gain, no program, no anything. Just checking in with people and maintaining that is so critical. So in this case, the relationship was with Evan Goldstein, who was a long time, obviously he's a master sommelier, but had done a number of programming initiatives with us in Sonoma County over the years, had known him, had been a big fan of his, had always enjoyed working with him, love how he talks about Sonoma County and just how he talks about wine and educates. And I was this is the irony, I was at a strategic planning meeting that I got invited to over in Napa, and it was about the future of fine wine. And I think I was only one of two Sonoma County folks had gone over the hill for this brainstorm session. And it was about the future of fine wine and really about the future of Cabernet. And I was kind of like, this is kind of an interesting audience. It's mostly Napa, wineries and some growers and their associations. So at lunch, Evan's there. So I sit by Evan. So I'm like, oh, a friend in the audience. And I know, not that it wasn't not friendly audience, but it was just someone I knew. And so I sat next to him and I'm like, and literally the press release had just come out about him being a master sommelier of the Giants. Right. And I was like, dude, that is so cool. Like, what does that even mean? He's like, I don't know. We're gonna figure it out, but we're gonna try tastings. I'm gonna get to curate some wine experience, whatever. I'm like, well, I want in. Like, Sonoma County wants in. Like, Bay Area, Giants, you. He goes, yeah. He's like, we should be able to work more together. And literally that night, he sent an email introduction to their head of strategic partnerships. And 2 weeks later, we're meeting. A month later, we're down at Oracle in their offices. And we're like, let's just try something. And I think there's this value to being an association where it's like, you know what, we're not beholden to one brand. We can bring your most expensive bottle of Cabernet from Sonoma County to the table, or the least expensive bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. So we literally have 100 different grape varieties grown here. We have all different price points. We have all different styles, all the different climates. So we really have this gift of being able to do so many different programming. So I think for someone like the Giants, and we kind of learned this, and you learn by doing, wow, we really have a lot of assets that we hadn't really packaged in that way. And that gave us sort of the courage to go meet with the Rockets, which they're owned by the same owners as Landry's Restaurants, which is another just decade-long partner of Sonoma County Winegrowers. And so, we wanted just to surprise people. I mean, I think more than ever, and I'm sure you spend endless amount of time talking about the state of the marketplace right now. But we got to be creative and innovative. You got to try things. You got to pop up and do things unexpected. Like with the Rockets, we do these pop-up winemaker dinners before games. It's come to a Rockets game, come an hour early, have literally a coursed meal meet the winemakers, while the players are warming up. And so I think you have to surprise folks. And we're about actually to sign 2 more sports deals. So hopefully stay tuned for the announcements. So
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. I mean, I think you're right. It's what necessity is the mother of invention, right? So we've got to change, we've got to evolve, we've got to find different ways to connect with people. And so that's one of the things that again, another thing that I just think is very cool what you're doing. And the Rockets thing was great because it's the Giants, okay, cool, it's our backyard, right? That we should be doing. But then you start doing something with the Rockets. So okay, we're not in the backyard, but this is awesome for Sonoma County to be out there and for people to get exposed to our wines and an environment that's not limited to some white tablecloths with stuffing, which is not comfortable for everybody. It's you're at you're watching the game and have a glass of wine, and that's cool. And some of the other things. So I just think providing different ways to expose consumers to Sonoma County and Sonoma County wines is great, which is a good segue to another thing that you're doing right now. So next thing you know, you're working with Amy G. And for people that don't know who Amy G is, she was like a sideline reporter for the Giants. And if you were a San Francisco Giants fan and you watch the games on a regular basis, she was very much a part of. Totally. She was basically on the team. She was one of the players or the coaches or the announcers.
She had 3 rings. So.
Yeah, I mean, and just very, very likable personality. Yeah. And so next thing you know, I'm hearing, okay, the Winegrowers are working with Amy G. and you've got this new program with her it's called Shoulder to Shoulder.
Yeah.
And so talk about that a little bit, because this is another thing I'm like, what the
Yeah.
heck? How does she have time to do all this stuff?
I know. So Amy G is another, just, she's amazing. She lives in Petaluma, so she's like local, loves Sonoma County. And so during our kind of launch of our Giants partnership, we did a video series with them. So it was Evan, Amy G, and then we partnered. We did one with Boleto, we did one out at San Giacomo, we did one at Rodney Strong. And so Amy G and Evan were the co-hosts. I popped in for like a second to talk about Sonoma County, and then the main thing was them interviewing, John Boleto and Steve San Giacomo or Justin Seidenfeld from Rodney Strong. And so we did sort of an intensive 2-day shoot, and Amy and I just clicked. Like, it was just, I was like, I want to like hang out and have a glass of wine. She's like, me too. So we did that. So like fast forward a couple of weeks, like, what are you up to? Let's meet. Let's just grab a glass of wine. Like, we kind of, again, like kind of like-minded values and enthusiasm. And she just loved the story. She's like, she's like, I've been a fan of wine. I love Sonoma County, I love agriculture. She's like, but I got to hear these backstories of these incredible like community members and farmers and be on their ranches. And she's like, I just love them. And I'm like, well, you want to talk more about them? Do more storytelling? Again, another incredible storyteller, with a very different style than Virginie, right? And she's like, I would love to. And we have been throwing around this idea of the shoulder to shoulder, which goes back to sort of that multi-generational, how do you learn? Well, you're shoulder to shoulder, whether it's with your employees in the vineyard, with your kids, your grandparents, you're learning from someone in the vineyard as you kind of walk, noodle your way through. And so shoulder to shoulder sort of took life, and it was like, let's go tell again, a little longer form, not a quick minute, but a longer form sort of storytelling. So we just launched. We actually recorded about 10 of them before we launched. Again, consistent content. So we didn't want to start and stop. So we're really excited. We rolled out the first 2, which was the first one featured Brett Munsell Vineyards. He's our current chair of our board. Incredible 100+ history in Alexander Valley, and his family, and 4 girls. I mean, daughters. I mean, he's a girl dad. And so it was just great. And then the next one we did was with the Knolls. So talking about them out of Dry Creek Valley, and next week we're going to release our next one. So in this first, year, we're releasing about 1 new video every 2 weeks. And again, I think part of it too is just capturing the legacy, like creating a bit of oral history for Sonoma County and having it recorded and having, those visuals and those interviews like here for us to use. I think it's just awesome. And again, Amy G is so great, and she's helping us with some of the sports partnerships. We took her to a Houston Rockets event, and she's literally walking through the Toyota somewhere, and someone's like, are you Amy G? And I was like, oh my God, we can't go anywhere. So it's pretty cool.
Well, she's got her own fan base, right? So a couple of things I love about this. She's got just a great personality, but once again, an opportunity to expose Sonoma County wines to, people that potentially don't know that much about it. And I did see I saw the first episode. I don't think I saw the Null episode, but her personality is so warm and approachable. And so that comes across as she's with the Munsell interview in particular, it's the opposite of what I think a lot of people think about wine that don't know much about it, right? They think we're unapproachable or uninviting or snobby or whatever. And it's the complete opposite of that. So I think I think it's going to be a home run, and I'm looking forward to seeing
all puns intended.
All puns intended. See, I didn't even think about that.
Right?
I got baseball in my mind because I'm watching the World Series, and it's so crazy.
I know, but we saw a little bit of it last night. It's just crazy. But no, I think you were totally right with Amy G. And it was really interesting because she's like, well, I want to be able to bring to this conversation the fact that I am a novice when it comes to wine and agriculture. So I get to ask the questions that maybe a more sophisticated wine buyer or journalist might not get to ask because I don't know these things. So I think that is really important. And then you have Virginie on the other hand, who knows so much that she's able to draw out these little nuanced nuggets of information and wisdom. So I think those two, the juxtaposition of this well-seasoned wine journalist veteran with Amy G, who brings in a new audience and just has, again, so much warmth, but comes from a very teach me about wine, teach me about farming. Why is that important? I get to ask these questions that you may all be wondering and thinking and don't maybe even have the courage to put out there. And so I think that's a nice balance for telling the stories of Sonoma County, because we're all of that, right? It's all of it.
I completely agree with you. It's there is no, what I love about it, it's not like you're looking for the silver bullet, right? So you're some people are going to resonate more with this, and some people are going to be resonate more with that. And why not? Cover all these
Yeah,
bases. I think it's
totally.
brilliant. So I'm not going to keep you too much longer, but I want to go back to we started to talk a little bit about at the beginning, and I want to go back to the farms of the future,
Oh yeah.
because I think that's another really cool thing that I guess started like, well, maybe it started with like, when you're having like your Shark Tank, but we're working with Ford and now John
Yeah.
Deere. So talk a little bit about the inspiration for that and how that program has evolved, because I think
Yeah.
this is one of the coolest things that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we talk a lot about like leadership academy and our employees, so critical. I mean, workforce, so critical, but literally thinking about the future of farming, like how do we survive and thrive in
Yeah,
agriculture as it gets tougher and tougher is critical. I mean, none of that, we won't have employees if we don't have farms. So it's really the foundation piece of everything we do. And it was inspired, it literally was, I think the seed had been planted with that innovation accelerator Shark Tank of like, we need more innovation, we need more partners. And then we were literally in conversations with Ford, Ford Motor Company, right as they were about ready to launch Ford Pro, their whole new sort of entity focused on electric vehicles and the launch of the F-150 Lightning. We were asking them for sponsorship of the new Hillsburg Wine and Food Experience. And they're like, well, we don't really do that. And I'm like, oh, but I'm like, your F-150 Lightning, it's about sustainability. We're about sustainability. And I was like, well, maybe we could do something with you on sustainability, but probably not sponsoring the wine event. I was like, okay, well, like, forget sponsorship. Let's talk. Like, all right, that idea is gone. You're open, but you opened another door. So let's go through that door. And they're like, well, what do your farmers think about, will they use an electric truck? And I'm like, you know what? I have no idea, but maybe we should find out together. And they were like, well, what would that look like? And I'm like, well, it's part of our, farm of the future. And they're like, well, what's that? I'm like, I don't know. I just created it. So let's figure it out. Like, at least I was honest. I'm like, it just like rolled out. But it really became, so you never know, right? So you just conversations, talking to people, being out there is so important. But yeah, so we literally Ford Pro signed up to pilot their Lightnings charging stations, their e-transit vans, telematics, which is their software that goes across all vehicles, diesel, gas, electric, to do this with us. So we did it with 3 ranches, and it literally was a game changer, I think, for our organization. And frankly, for me, running the organization, to feel empowered or encouraged to really go ask people for bold things that seem like, and to get people's attention. I mean, it was sort of like, I never in a million years thought we'd have Ford Motor Company. I mean, they literally launched the F-150 Lightning globally from Sonoma County.
yeah,
Like, global launch. And it was like, how did that happen? And it's like, well, we asked. And you just kind of like, all those times you're like, I really want this, but I'm too afraid to ask. They're going to turn me down. It was like, just try.
yeah,
And so with that, it really started to say, like, because of that relationship, we had to start to really formulate why Sonoma County was the right place for the farm of the future. And then it became kind of easy, like, all right, we have more soil types in France. We have 19 different, right now, American viticultural areas with different climates and topography and soils. We have more coastline than the other wine region in Sonoma County. Or in California, we grow over 100 different grape varieties. We've literally farmed any and every crop that exists in Sonoma County at one point. We've evolved. We have really innovative farmers. We have a commitment to sustainability. Like, we should be piloting every piece of equipment, technology, new app that could matter for agriculture here in Sonoma County. Why not? And so we then kind of just did this open, like, it kind of took that Shark Tank idea and put it on like steroids of like, let's run. And through that, we launched a 5-year partnership with Wilbur Ellis, really looking at like regenerative agriculture, healthy soils. We added agrology, which is a carbon sensor that sits in the canopy, real-time data on what's happening with carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas emissions. And then I courted, begged, harassed, I used John Deere for 6 months. I mean, it started with like finding an email address in one of their press releases about a topic that was relevant, and just knocking. And finally, we hosted a Farm of the Future Summit last summer. John Deere showed up, and about 2 weeks later, they flew their entire leadership team out to meet with our farmers. And 6 months later, we announced our collaboration with them. So, you just kind of keep delivering. And it was so fun. This last weekend, actually, we had he just retired. The CEO of Ford Pro was here with the CEO of Wilbur Ellis, their friends. They brought their spouses. And we just honestly, we just broke bread and enjoyed wine and like sort of celebrated the fact that we've all been working on this really great sort of innovative partnership together, and we've become friends. So
I know from experience. So once you get them on the ranch, it's done.
yeah,
They're
totally.
done.
I mean, Sonoma County is our biggest asset, right? And then the people, the experience, the beauty, just the authenticity of everything we do, like it's all here and you name it. You go to Munsell, you go to Bevel, you go to Dutton, you go to like it's all there. It doesn't matter who you visit. It sits there.
No,
I mean,
I've seen it a million times. Once they're on the ranch and then they get to meet some of the folks like you just mentioned, they can't be any way but who they really are, right? They're just authenticity with a capital A through Y. I mean, it just is that way. What was it like for the three ranches? Like when you did the first pilot with the Ford, like now they're driving electric vehicles. Like, how do they like it? What was it like for those guys?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so interesting. I mean, you learn so much. I mean, I think the biggest thing is like, and I always say this with all the partnerships. I'm like, look, you're going to get really honest feedback. The farmers don't know how to do anything else but honest. So like it or love it, you're going to hear exactly what's working. So I think we learned that the parameters for electric vehicles like could work. I should say it this way, that electric vehicles work really well under specific parameters. So they are not, as of yet, the trucks at least, the vehicle that you're going to be hauling equipment with that is going to be sort of, relied on maybe during harvest season, middle of the night, what's the charging capability sort of thing. Right. But for those, and that's not to say it won't change, but just the battery life and it goes down as you're hauling stuff, the hillside. So if you're like in heavy hillside farming in Alexander Valley, you're going to drain that battery so much faster than flat level Sonoma Valley, plain. And so, but like and through telematics, we were able to find those drivers that were like driving the most miles. But if you put your runners, people that are like zipping around, maybe doing, grape checks, or doing, disease, resistant, looking at what's happening in the vineyards, there's scouters kind of, you put those folks in the truck, you literally will actually get a return on investment of that truck in like 4 to 5 years, which no vehicle ever returns on investment, but the gas savings, the oil changes you don't have to do, the equipments you don't have to, parts you don't have to maintain on an electric truck versus another. So I think that's really cool. I mean, charging, we need more infrastructure for charging. We need to figure out how to have charging stations in rural parts of our community. So I think there's a bigger kind of put a spotlight on maybe a bigger infrastructure need if we really want to be committed to this idea of electrification.
Yeah. Well, I think it's cool. I mean, you got to get, you got to start somewhere. But as you said earlier, like all these things really do tie back to your 100-year plan, which I think is just really, it's just so cool.
It's crazy, huh?
All right, we're gonna wrap it up here, but I can't finish without talking a little bit about how challenging it is right now for our industry. And I think about, I feel like it's hardest on the grape growers. I mean, I know the wineries, not to downplay any of the struggles that the wineries have experienced or some of our other industry vendors have experienced, right? So, barrel guys may have sold half as many barrels this year as they have, but, I feel like you can make adjustments. But for our growers, it's not unusual for, a typical grower to have a line of credit that he works off for the entire year, pay for all the farming, and then he sells his fruit, he ggets paid, he pays down the line, and that's the cycle, and he gets to keep whatever's extra, and you start all over again. But, in a year like we've had where, there's just been no buyers and going into for those of you it's like, sometimes we're growing and sells grapes. They might chase it with a little more money and pick the grapes themselves and turn it into bulk wine and make their money back that way. But there really weren't many opportunities in that vein as well. So it's a very difficult time for our growers. What do you like? What's your message because I know you're having these conversations. These are not just your members, these are your friends and family. And so what sort of message are you pushing out there to folks?
I mean, I think if you really think about how do you make our growers successful, and they would say it too, they need their partners to be successful, their partners meaning their winery partners to be successful. So we've had just really honest conversations at our board, again, with the growers out in the community. It's like, frankly, you need to, in a time that seems like you don't want to take risks and you want to like hunker down and not spend and not invest, it's probably more important than ever to sort of keep your foot on the gas. And I say that mainly from like an organization like ours, like we could sort of shut down and say, okay, we're going to back off. And instead our board was like, no, we need marketing more than ever. We need more partnerships. We need more outlets to sell wine. Like go help a Rodney Strong, go help a Sonoma Couture, go help a Jordan, go help whatever, like these wineries that are buying grapes from, all different growers. And so I think we've really seen like, how do we just continue just to like, again, I talk about potentially 2 new sports partnerships, and some of those come with interesting places to maybe sell some wine and look at those avenues. And so I think it's more than ever, you can't be afraid and back down. You have to, at least from a marketing perspective, really push forward. I mean, I think for the other side then, okay, so now you're a grower and you're looking at like, what's next? I mean, some of these Farm of the Future collaborations we're doing try to help take some of the risk out of buying the next tractor or buying the next vehicle or thinking about how you amend your soils because of what the return is. So we're trying to build that, case study repository so they're making smart decisions, or as smart of decisions as they can moving forward. And also, having those tough conversations like, yeah, if you're thinking that it might be time for a replant, great, go get the permit. Give it a year, see how you feel, how you do that. And you just never know. I mean, we're 1 year away from having a light crop and everything resets the other way. And that's why farming, right? They always say like, okay, gambling was taken. That's why it's called farming, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so you don't know. I mean, cab came in incredibly light this year for 2 reasons. One, it was a light crop, and then the heat kind of spike at the end while there was still about 15% of crop out there, kind of shrunk the rest of it. And so who knew cab was going to come in so light? But everything was coming in versus incredibly, probably our second largest vintage in Sonoma County, like at least in the last 10 years. So you're coming off a really big year, which, you can't control either. So yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a tough time. And I think, I tell growers, just work and really be a good partner to your winery partners and ask. And I think those that have invested in those relationships over the long term are seeing that they're working together to sort of weather collectively what's happening in the marketplace. And relationships matter so much, those partnerships, the give and take.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's funny, I've said exactly that same thing to some of the other vendors that we work with. I mean, even during the pandemic, I was like, this is not a time to hunker down. This is a time to be creative and innovative and, keep your foot firmly on the gas, because, and I remember talking to some of our staff, you'll watch some of these companies that are hunkering down, you will never see them again.
I know.
The hunker down, right, right their way out of business. Well, listen, thank you so much. This is really fun. It's fun to hear you talk a little bit more about how some of these different initiatives that you put together have come together, and what prompted them and how they've evolved. And this is really fun. So I love working with you. I think you're doing a great job, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens over the next 5 or 10 years with you, because it's just looking at what you've done in the last 10 years. I mean,
I don't like to be bored, George. I'm sure that's not a surprise.
You're definitely not going to be bored. Well, listen, thanks again. And thanks to everybody for watching. If you liked our video, go ahead and like our YouTube channel, and stay tuned for an upcoming Insider Series. Thank you, Karissa.
Yeah, thanks, George.